we're paying the money in the first place, the state is. I don't think we're taking local control away at all, because we're not asking to change bus routes. We're not asking to change the number of buses. We're just saying instead of Matsu putting out for this many buses and Fairbanks putting out for this, now it's twice as much. And then you add Anchorage into that. Now you have a contract worthwhile for more people to bid on, and that's where the real issue is. So I don't get the local control portion of it, but I think this is probably a commissioner question versus, I don't want to put Elizabeth on, but I've been waiting for years for this answer, and this was not the answer we expected. I think, we will go out and ask the districts whether they want us to pursue this, and we need to get amounts too, Madam Chair, on how much operating funds are currently going into busing because the state isn't paying the right amount and isn't doing something about it. But it's not Ms. Noodleman to make that kind of decision on it, but I think we need to have this discussion with the commissioner because it was to combine them all so that we could get a bit of bang for a buck and get operating dollars put back into the classrooms where they belong. I'm done.
So are you suggesting that be the party to the contract?
I'm suggesting that since the state is not paying the full cost and they have an option of maybe being able to cover it by making one contract for them because they're paying we're paying the money anyway. So you can make the liability still to the school districts, but at the end of the day, I think the state always gets sued. The Casale case being one of those. So, I don't think it gets us out of any liability. What we're trying to say is that the whole reason for bringing this forward is, as Representative Gaddis already said, they already knew their routes. They already knew how many bus drivers, how many buses. I don't think we needed to have a person indeed for the last 2 years to to gather that information. The point was to try to be more efficient and taking our 5 large districts, which is most of that $78 million, not changing the way they're doing anything, but save money because my understanding was, again, because with one district doing it, by the time they get buses up here or build buildings or do whatever they need, it's not worthwhile. But if you put enough people together, it makes it worthwhile. Now you've got people competing, which lowers the cost and doesn't take any local control away. And I think we need to quit using that as an excuse for everything. We pay for busing. If they don't want our money, they can go get their own buses. But I think they are asking for our help, and that's why we went this way. And again, like other things we talked about today, we failed. So I guess, I'm just really frustrated.
I actually, this is, for the record, Les Morris, the Deputy Commissioner at the Department. I actually don't believe we failed, because what we were asked to do is to get back to a system that got all the contractors or all the districts, the large districts, to align the time they put out their contracts.
That's right, so far.
That's the exact work that we have been doing. I don't think there was any intent, and I participated in these discussions. I never heard anyone suggest that the state take over the contracting. So what we did is work with the districts to align their contracts so they put those bids out together. You take those largest 3 districts, you're going to get economy of scale by them going out and at the same time. But there is no way that you can dismiss each district having some issues that are unique, and I think Ms. Noodleman pointed those out. They include the age of the buses. The age of the buses are different. You don't get new buses every time you roll out that contract. The large bus barn needed in one district and not in other districts. Well, you're not going to tell the one district they can't have a bus barn and tell the other 2 they should have a bus barn. So there's actually a lot of progress been made on these issues. And then the last thing, we're talking about routes. The issue that we had is when we had a reimbursable system, everything came through to the state. If you wanted to add a route, you had to come to the state. Well, then when we made this simply a formula program and no longer had the accountability to it, that all landed with districts. So we had no idea how many routes they had, and they could add routes, they could change things, but the truth was those additional routes, whether needed or not, or whether they fit regulations or not, added to costs. And so part of cost containment is to get solid accountability reporting around those things. So I do not believe we failed based on what the legislature in law told us to do, and I think that we have made considerable progress, and think that, certainly we can have more discussion throughout the legislative session on it, but I think we made some considerable progress on this. And
thank you, Les. And I think that our, at least I can speak for myself, the biggest disappointment is I certainly had a different idea of where we were going, and so clearly there was a failure to communicate.
And it was, and I want to add to that. That was this discussion happened before the 2012 that's in here. Mm-hmm. This was discussed prior to that. The transportation before this one, there was another statute that changed was on there, and. I guess I have more faith in the districts, thinking that they didn't need deed to get them all on the same wavelength. I think they all, the ones I have talked to, thought the reason we were making everybody together was so that one contract could be made. But maybe the legislation was as clear as some of us remember it being, and maybe we need to have clear legislation done so we get what we asked for.
We'll know better next time. Mr. Neese.
Just 2 points. Commissioner, I think you may. Pardon? Deputy Commissioner. I think you made the point I was going to make. Prior to this formula-driven system that is now costing the state more money, your words, we had a direct reimbursement system. You got paid for hauling kids with buses. That was simple. That was back when we were poor, and that made a lot of sense. We're poor again. Why would we not go back to that system? I mean, if it's too hard for you to give out a statewide contract, hey, we'll make it easy. We'll go back to direct reimbursement. You send us the bill, we pay you, and we'll have control over routes. Remember, you said they added unnecessary routes and stuff. The second question I had, Daily News Miner ran an article. Juneau picked it up. I haven't seen it in the ADN. Talking about that in our state statute, we have in 1988 or 89, it was the 15th, 16th session, added a clause in there making the pay rate for school bus drivers tied to the minimum wage. So when we raised the minimum wage in the state of Alaska, we directly raised the rate of every school bus driver in the state. Do you know how much a school bus driver would be making? And if you do not know, could you find out and let us know what the 3 minimum wage raises over the next couple of years is going to do to the people driving the yellow buses that may or may not be funded by the gold from the state and may or may not be direct reimbursement? I'd just like to know, because it's looking like it's about double minimum wage, which means it's a pretty good chunk of change. So if you don't know that information, could you provide it to Representative Gaddis and Wilson? Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll pass it on.
Chair, this is Elizabeth Noodleman, and we will look for that. I think what's important to remember, and when we last looked at that, is in order to get a school bus driver and have someone with the level of competence and necessity for that, many of those drivers are already paid double the minimum wage. So even an increase in the minimum wage would not necessarily affect every single driver. So the drivers, they were not at the minimum levels to start with, just because these are, it takes a certain amount of.
Okay, we're going to move on, Marcy, but I got it that a lot of folks are not.
I have the answer.
Yeah. Representative Wilson has the answer.
So the answer is, thank you, Newsminer, $15.50 for 2009 if it were to increase. By 2016, it will be $19.50 per hour.
Yeah, but I think that Elizabeth.
And that's if they're making less than $19.50.
She was indicating that there's a lot of people. They might have been already on par.
But it's $19.50 if they're not making it. So.
Gotcha. Any other questions or statements before we move on to the next subject?
Nope.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Les. The next subject that we'll move on is item number 8, which is outstanding bonds for school construction